Great. Welcome everybody to Village of Washingtonville Planning Board. This is our work session meeting, Tuesday, May 10th. It is 7 o'clock. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. We have no public here today, but for anybody watching back on the recordings, if anybody wants to submit public comment, they can do so by emailing me at selinaroper.planningboard@gmail.com or attending our second meeting of the month, which is the fourth Tuesday. That is for public comment. We have two items. First one is the applicant is 61 East Main Street Associates LLC. 61 East Main Street, application for site plan and lot line removal, section block and lot 114-1-3.22 and 113-2-31, OR zoning district. Proposed use is the demolition of existing multifamily dwelling and construction of two 7,000 square feet, two-story apartment buildings with 14 apartments and 28 bedrooms total for each, along with parking facilities. So just a reminder, I had previously recused myself from this application, so I will be here to just navigate the meeting, but I will not participate in comment and will abstain from votes. You're up.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Morgante. I'm the engineer for this application before the board. I also have with me tonight, I'm sure you're well aware, Brian Gibson, the project attorney. And I also brought along with me tonight Phil Greeley, who is the project traffic consultant, because I know traffic was had some concerns associated with it, so I figured I would bring Mr. Greeley with us tonight so that if there's any specific questions that you have, you can direct them towards him. In general, the plans have remained largely unchanged from what you've seen submitted in the past. I basically just went through Mr. Petrosini's comment letter that I last received and did my best attempt to address those comments. And apparently from the most recent comment letter I got back from him, I did okay. So I think, I mean, there's still some outstanding stuff on here, but you know, nothing that is a showstopper, so to speak. So, I mean, I'd be glad to go through some of the changes with the planning board if you'd like. They were largely technical engineering issues. I don't know if I'll be boring you with that stuff, but I'm certainly glad to do that. So there were just some basic items on the bulk table that needed to be cleaned up in terms of setbacks and bedroom calculations and things of that nature. There were some technical comments associated with the stormwater pollution prevention plan that was submitted. One outstanding comment that still exists is to essentially provide a maintenance schedule, operation and maintenance costs that go with it, but the boilerplate for the stormwater agreement at least has been provided. We can certainly back up that agreement with the information that John's requesting. I think there were some questions regarding the traffic analysis that I see here on the comment letter. And there were some lighting cut sheets that were requested for me to put on the plans, which certainly can be done. And I do have the project surveyor working on getting inverts for the sewer manholes that are out on 94. Hopefully we'll get them back sometime soon. So I mean, that large in part in the general summary is what's been done on my behalf since the last time we've been here. I would turn it over to the board and their consultants at this point if there's anything additional, and in particular if there's any questions you have with Mr. Greeley.
Yeah, for the most part, we've gone through a couple of rounds of review now, and as Mike said, he's taking care of the bulk of the items. A couple of minor outstanding issues. The only question I had left, there was talk about a flashing beacon. So I want to discuss that a little bit.
So, as part of our traffic study, we looked at the possibility of people crossing. We have an existing crosswalk in that proximity. In the last couple of years, what we found, especially more village settings, the areas that, in order to accommodate pedestrians, New York State DOT has gone to what's called a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, which allows a pedestrian to activate it when they're there. It's not a full traffic signal. And, you know, by law, you are supposed to stop if somebody's in a crosswalk to begin with. But this is a device that's been used mostly in, you know, village areas. You know, we've done a bunch of these designs, and most of them are in villages in Westchester County. You'll see them near colleges, like near Vassar College. There's a whole series of those where there's a lot of mid-block pedestrian movements. So we had recommended that to be looked at, subject to DOT approval, as a way of accommodating pedestrians crossing, so that if somebody wasn't going to go down for the signal at Brotherhood Plaza Drive, you know, they could cross at that crosswalk. I don't know the whole history of that crosswalk that's there, but we made that recommendation. In terms of process with DOT, we made a formal submission to them on April 14th. They responded in record time, April 26th, with a few technical comments, asking for additional information, wanted to know what we observed in terms of pedestrian movements, you know, at the crosswalk, which were relatively light, but again, that's, you know, before the development is there. And so in terms of the comments from DOT, there were a couple of technical comments about the operation of the signal at Brotherhood Plaza Drive, which we've already addressed, about trip generation. In our study, we analyzed the 28 units as if they were single-family homes in terms of traffic generation, which is conservative. Typically, a multifamily in a 1 hour period will generate somewhere between half a trip to 0.6, 0.65 trips per dwelling unit. That's a basic, you know, a 1 hour analysis period. Our single-family unit will generate somewhere around 1 trip in the peak hour period. And people say, well, people have 2 cars, how can you only generate 1 trip? Well, you know, people travel over multiple hours, but when you look at it in whole, it's in that order of magnitude. So our analysis was based on, as if it was, you know, single-family traffic generation, 1 trip per dwelling unit. In terms of the DOTs, they're still looking at whether or not the RRFB is something they're going to approve. But, you know, assuming that they do approve it, we would be responsible to install it as part of the project. The design of these, some of them are hardwired, most of them are solar powered. And positioning wise here out in East Main Street on 94, you know, we would have good position to get enough, you know, solar power. So where they are right now in terms of review process, there are several items on the site plan that they want to see. They want to see the exact location of the driveways across the street, which are offset really from our driveway. They want to see some more information on some of the drainage and the treatment of the sidewalk along the frontage in terms of ADA compatibility, et cetera. So where we are now is, you know, they've accepted our traffic numbers. We have a confirmation back from them that they're okay with the traffic data. We're putting together the plan items that they've asked for, and then they'll, as part of the highway work permit, which a lot of times until a project is almost approved, they won't process, well, first of all, they won't issue the highway work permit until there's a neg deck, site plan approval, and then they'll issue the highway work permit. But we've started the process early, you know, to make sure that they're on board and to get some feedback, you know, for the plan. So we'll keep you apprised of that, but right now the next step is for us to resubmit these additional site plan items, which are pretty straightforward. It's just, you know, getting them documented on the plan and so forth.
Yeah, just to echo what he said, that a lot of it was actually surveying information. I actually had to send the surveyor back out there to locate a lot of site features. It's just like most of the questions that I think the DOT had. I would say in large part, the traffic portion, the meat and potatoes of that submittal is behind us. So we're dealing with minor site plan issues right now. But you have a question?
I'm sorry.
It said that the traffic portion of the study is done and been accepted and I guess approved by the DOT.
Yes.
When was it done?
The study was done in December of 2021. So part of the study included identifying existing traffic volumes because at the time we were still in the COVID protocol in terms of DOT studies. We have to go back and look at historical data along Route 94, incorporate those adjustments. You know, the projections are projected out 2 years with a conservative background growth rate to account for other developments. I think there were 1 or 2 other projects in the village that we accounted for their traffic on top of things, in addition to the background growth. And then the trip estimates I described. So the study is dated December 2021, but again, the base traffic additions are adjusted based on historical DOT data. And, you know, we have,
So
in our records,
if I'm
counts
understanding,
going back to the 1990s along the corridor.
yeah, if I'm understanding correctly, it's data from December 20th, holiday week in COVID year.
Yes,
Okay.
and adjusted, you know, based on DOT
And
record.
anybody from the village, our village engineer, has any of us reviewed this, seen it? Do we know what
Yes,
it looks like?
we have copies of the traffic study. We did receive that.
Okay. Then again, I'm just going by personal experience.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of traffic in this village, in particular in the mornings and the evenings.
Yes,
Right there at the Brotherhood Light
Yes.
and going into town. I myself have been sitting in traffic in the morning on a Friday,
Mhm.
well past the bank.
Yes.
Well past. So curious as to how we came up with.
I mean, in terms of the traffic in the heart of the village, okay, at the intersection of 208, you know, traffic backs up there. At Brotherhood, if there's issues there, that signal seems to be operating okay, but if there's something malfunctioning, we'll take care of that with DOT. But I think the backups, you know, clearly the volumes on East Main Street crossing in front of this property are heavy in peak hours. I mean, it shows from the historical data. DOT on the corridor maintains machine traffic counts, so by day of week and different times of the year. So in our study, while we do turning movement counts to see where people are turning to and from, those are adjusted based on the DOT data, which encompasses those conditions. Now, in terms of backups, as I said, you know, in the heart of the village, you'll see backups, yes, in the rush hour. You know, the amount of traffic that we're adding to that intersection is relatively light. If you look at the distribution of traffic based on the pattern on the road in the rush hours, let's say going out in the morning of the traffic leaving here, we estimated about 60 to 65% going left towards the village and the balance going right out on 94. So again, that's based on current patterns, which we would expect to continue. So the bulk of it does go there. But, you know, if you're talking about even at our conservative numbers, which again, for a multifamily, it doesn't generate one trip per dwelling unit. Even at conservative numbers, you're talking about adding maybe 10 vehicles to the main intersection in the village, you know, by the time you get to it. And that would be total both directions, not just one direction. So that variation is probably a variation you'll see, you know, from one weekday to the next weekday, through an intersection like that.
Okay. And again, I don't know when this report was received or whatnot, but it's something I'd probably like to take a look at. Maybe
Absolutely.
understand it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how they got accurate data during a holiday week and during a COVID
Yeah.
year. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
What he's explaining is they do actual physical counts, but then there are adjusting factors applied to that. You know, we can't tell them come back and do a traffic study in 3 years when any COVID impact is gone. So what the DOT has established is, okay, there is an impact from COVID. We know what the flows were pre-COVID, and we're going to adjust across the board current traffic flow to account for a minor increase over time from what we knew was going on to account for the fact that it may be lower today than it would have been without COVID. So there is an upward adjustment of the actual counted number of vehicles to account.
And they were okay with the single driveway going right and left?
Well, that's DOT's review. We haven't seen their formal response, but as part of the review, we want to know that the site plan that we're going through, that the DOT's not going to have some major objection that would significantly alter it. So as they've done, we encourage them to go to the DOT, make sure that we're at least on the right track. They will have comments, they'll have requirements from DOT. The DOT is going to specify the type of curbing installed at the project entrance, the specific pavement criteria at the entrance. That we leave to DOT. Those items, we don't really care. The finished driveway surface is what it is. But we do care if DOT, for whatever reason, says, no, you have to shift the entrance 50 feet.
Right.
That's going to affect your review. So there's a little bit of overlap in what we care about, but the specifics, including the traffic study, are more for DOT on a DOT-regulated roadway.
Okay.
You obviously care about traffic, so you do have,
Well, I'm just concerned that we're introducing, then again, I know there's multi-family dwellings going in on North Street. We just put in the Orange County Bagel with more stores. There used to be one store, now there's three. And, you know, a lot of stuff happened, and don't want to introduce too much traffic unless we're absolutely sure that 20894 can handle it. And I think we beat this part up enough, but I did want to get to school buses. Where did the school buses pick up the kids? On 94, or will they pull into the parking lot?
My understanding is that they would pick up on 94. But again, typically, they won't pull into a development like this, okay? In terms of, could there be another option? I don't see on this site.
currently with it being rental units, do we know where the school bus picks those kids up?
I'd have to go back and check to see. I
I'm not sure if
just
there's-
can't
I'm not sure
remember.
if there's a stop there right now.
I
Well,
don't.
there's some type of facility very close by where the
Yes.
school bus stops. I mean, I used to
Yeah,
go through that
the daycare,
intersection
the
too.
daycare that's
That's
right
what
over
it
here,
is.
just stopped on the main road
But
before.
I don't
Now
know
we're-
if
now
there's
we're
any
talking-
that we're stopping at this
Yeah,
building.
a lot more units, probably across all three schools. So I mean, we could have 3 school buses stopping there and stopping traffic on 94 in both directions while they load or unload those buses a couple times a day for 3 schools. So we're talking about six stops. And I'm wondering if that factors into the DOT calculation too.
As part of the school buses that we counted and that are part of the DOT database along that corridor, whether they're stopping right in front of this property today or a little further down, they're accounted for in the traffic street. So when the traffic counts are done, it includes school buses it's classified by vehicle type. So they're accounted for. An additional stop, whether they're stopping, 200 feet down, further to the west.
Yeah, but you have to admit, it's different if they're
Absolutely.
stopping for a house or if they're stopping.
Absolutely.
Just because I have a little bit of knowledge of this, I think there's designated stops on 94 that handle 2, 3, and 4 units at a time. And if you fall within those 2, 3, 4 units, like, that's where you have to line up for the bus, you follow what I'm saying?
Well-
They're not gonna stop at our building just because we have a new building now with kids, whatever the
Yeah,
district.
but there's no, I don't believe there's a sidewalk that runs along that whole thing, so they're not gonna stick those kids down 94. They're not gonna make those kids walk either way down 94.
No,
They may make them walk across
I'm
the street.
talking about
with
where
the
we
sidewalk.
are.
It's up to the school district where the bus stops will be.
Understood.
They may designate that, yes, we have enough enrolled kids at this development that it's worth a stop, or they could just as easily say, no, the kids have to walk to this stop. That's up to them, and we're not gonna know the answer until we have people living here. Would it make a difference as far as Whether the bus spot stops specifically in front of this building, probably, and no, that is not gonna be reflected in the traffic study, as opposed to it stopping 100 feet, 200 feet away from. That's not something that would be included in a typical traffic study.
Just from my experience down there, I think that the real culprit are the lights. And, you know, the school buses, probably, their impact lessens because people are already backed up. One other thing that, just for clarity, if the DOT comes in and says that they're gonna move our entrance 50 feet one way or the other, we're back in front of you, because it would be a change in the site plan. So
Yeah, that's what I was
if
gonna
there's
ask,
some major change,
if you
we're back to
actually
you.
knew or have a guess at what the DOT was saying where your current exit is, do you know if they're like, oh, they're okay with it, or do you think they'll push it back again?
Well, at this point, they haven't made that determination because one of the items that they're asking for is they want to see the location of the driveways exactly
Compared to across the
relative
street
to.
and stuff?
They
yeah.
want to see that whole stretch. So, again, they haven't made a determination on the positioning of the driveway in terms of the traffic study and the traffic numbers, et cetera. They're okay with that, but until they see the positioning of the other driveways, they will not give us an exact answer on it. So we're collecting that information so it can be shown accurately on the plan, and then they will, you know, give us a comment on, yes, your driveway is good right where it is, and eventually we'll get a conceptual approval letter from them. So right now, that's still up in the air.
But that's exactly why we encourage
Right.
them to go to DOT now, so that neither your board or the DOT has to approve something and then start
Come back
over
again.
with a new version.
It's worth noting, I believe that's an existing curve, right? We're not really changing the location
Yeah.
tremendously. So I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch,
Yeah.
but
And-
Now, according to where the crosswalk is on the map here versus where the current driveway is, it looks like there will be a change.
yeah, it's further to the north, but it's not a tremendous relocation.
And then I do think the sign you're talking about, if it does get approved, will be beneficial, because as it is now, that's actually the end of the sidewalk on that side of the road,
Correct.
so there's nowhere for a pedestrian to go if they're utilizing that sidewalk.
Correct.
And pedestrian safety is actually one thing we really are trying to work on and make sure it's, you know, applicable in the village, because, and we've had issues before with other applicants trying to go to the DOT in regards to crosswalk, signage, et cetera. So if you guys can get a good response back, that would be awesome.
Well, I think the advantage here is that there's an existing crosswalk. And again, I don't know the history of that, but it's probably related to the sidewalk ending in that vicinity. And so the likelihood of getting the RRFB approved is better, but they will, you know, make that determination and the exact location on the drive.
From the DOT's perspective, their ideal would be to have a state highway without a single driveway, a single curb, absolutely nothing
No lights.
that could slow down traffic. Where you had problems previously getting a new crosswalk, they try and limit any interruption to flow of traffic, which you're saying the same. Introducing a new crosswalk is an extra delay. So they don't want that. They want maximize what's already there, make the best of it, but they don't want to introduce new.
That might be why, if my memory serves me correct, I believe might have been the school tried to get that sign previously and was denied.
The school and the mayor combined were working towards getting it, and they were denied. You know, but the more crossings, entrances, et cetera, that you have in a given distance, the more stop and go you're gonna have, and the more you're gonna sit at that traffic light waiting to get through. So they do try and minimize that as much as possible.
I think there was a question about The driveway, I don't know if you finished the answer about asking about lefts and right out of the driveway. So,
You
as
answered
part,
that.
as part of the DOT's review, and their position has been, they don't want two lanes exiting from a driveway. They've taken this position in the last couple of years. So at an unsignalized intersection, they want to have a single lane exiting for lefts and rights. And the reason is because over the years, when you have side-by-side on this, and you have a large vehicle, people are making turns without really looking. So, will there be any turn restrictions? I don't anticipate that because there are some gaps created by the signal. There's backups, but there's also gaps created by the signal at Brotherhood. But again, they'll make that determination, the location, and whether there's any restrictions on any movements.
If your board has any specific requests, requirements, concerns, you're certainly free to draft a letter to the DOT to ask them to consider those factors during their review. They are their own authority, so they don't have to accept it, but they will accept your comments and consider them.
Yeah, because the only concern that, at least I have, is floater vehicles. Vehicles that get too impatient, waiting at that big line, and end up trying to squeeze their way out into traffic when, I said the traffic line is passed. The most that would be is, like you said, just ask the DOT, hey, between the hours of, 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. during the school time, the traffic backs up past there, and between, the afternoon times usually, 2 to 5 p.m., it backs up there. A sign that says no left turn between those hours. Other than that, everything's fine.
Yeah, I think here that what most people are concerned about is the left-hand turn. And from a practical point of view, although we would be adding 10 cars, which is nothing compared to what goes down that street during rush hour, but we'd only be adding those cars at points when there are gaps. It isn't like we're coming from Newburgh, backing it up. We only can enter the road when there's a space available. And I think that's significant.
Yeah, it just in order of magnitude, in the afternoon rush hour and 1 hour period, you have, over 900, I think it's over 1,000 actually, the highest hour, total flying both directions. It's about 1,000 vehicles, 5 and change one direction and close to 500 in the opposite direction. So, it's a heavy corridor, it's a main state corridor.
So,
And there are, some gaps in there, but, like any other intersection that's unsignalized, the amount of volume here is a consideration. We're not talking about major amounts of vehicles. You're talking about one car every 6 minutes trying to make a
but
left.
when we're already, everybody's sitting here agreeing that we have too much traffic in the village now and that it's backed up. And
Understood?
now we're talking about adding 50 more cars at any given point during the day, spots for 50 cars there, plus all of the additional traffic that comes in, UPS, deliveries, garbage, school buses, et cetera. So we're already saying we got too much traffic in the village, and we're gonna add 28 more, 2-bedroom units, and we're looking at adding additional things on North Street, and so on. So again, I'm looking at this not just for a single project, but
Holistic,
the whole
yeah.
thing, and just how many cars are we gonna introduce to the village before we're at a standstill?
And we did, just so you know, we did include traffic for 36 North Street as part of this study, and then the background growth, so that was accounted for in terms of.
Okay, thank you.
I think what Brian was trying to say before is that the queuing is gonna be shared inside our site, because we can't turn until there's, what he's saying is a gap. It's not like our project is miles down the road on 208, that people are coming out and contributing to volume more quickly that gets to this intersection fast. I'm not sure, is that what you
Yeah,
you were trying
exactly.
to get at?
Is that,
So,
we're going only into that traffic when there's a space available.
If you're coming out, if you're going home, coming home, then you're
Well,
in the
coming
mix with
home,
everybody else.
yeah, if you're coming home and you stop to make a left-hand turn.
But again, it's introducing, and again, if we were talking about 6 units, 4 units, doesn't matter. We're talking, there's a lot of bedrooms there, a lot of cars, percentage-wise. But again, the DOT is gonna tell us if it works or not, I guess.
And if it was a larger project than this, and even more through volume on the road, DOT may be looking at, providing a left turn lane on the state highway. However, in a village setting, like this, it's not typical at a driveway. And the other complication of widening the road further is then it's more difficult for pedestrians, which is counterintuitive to what you really want to do in the village area. If you were out further outside the village on 94, that would be something DOT would be looking at, for larger projects to widen, to create turn lanes, but.
Well, again, we'll look forward to seeing what the DOT has to say.
You're right in saying that each individual project contributes very little, and overall there is an impact. Unfortunately, you can't just look at one project and say we're going to hold that whole impact against you. If the village wants to come up with some kind of an overall plan and try and coordinate that with DOT, they definitely can. If this was if you decide this is a substantial impact, we could look at this project and ask them what they can do to mitigate it. I believe your study shows 0.2 of a second additional
Very
delay.
minor delay increases, not
At
significant.
what threshold do you want to call an impact significant? And have that applicant look into mitigations.
Maybe I'm not understanding the DOT, I guess what they have to say. Do they basically give this thing a go or no-go? Or is it, they say, well, this is going to be the impact, and then somebody else decides?
Well, two things that they'll do, and John can add to what I'm gonna tell you. So number one is they'll look at it to see what the impact is. So for example, let's say at the Brotherhood Light, we were creating a 10-second delay increase, just, so then DOT may look at it and say, we need you to replace the actuation at that signal with a video camera so that it can be more responsive. We're not showing that level of impact, but if it was a larger project and there was an impact, they would look at a mitigation that they would recommend as part of our permit to be done, and they would advise the village of that. In this case here, they're gonna weigh in on whether or not they want something done with the RRFB for accommodating pedestrians, or they could come back and say, we want you to do something at the signal. They could. I don't think so, because we're not showing any significant impact, but they could come back.
Okay, so if they come back with whatever recommendations, and
That
you
would be
decide
part
to
of
do
our
the
permit.
recommendations, then the project's a go, and what the board says doesn't matter.
Well, that's not true.
No.
Okay? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, who makes the
Yeah.
decision?
Well, the ultimate approval of the site plan is up to you. You're reviewing the site plan. The entrance onto a state highway is one aspect of that site plan, which is DOT's jurisdiction.